Conversation, the Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, last night I said there was going to be the big Brexit debate today in Strasbourg in the European Parliament, and I asked the question, would sparks fly in the chamber today? Well, in the course of a 3-hour debate, they certainly did. My view is that since we triggered Article 50 last Wednesday, the demands that have been made upon us by the European Union have been not just unacceptable, but actually virtually impossible. You know, for a negotiation to happen, two sides set out a position and try and compromise in the middle. But if one of them goes way, way too far, and in my view, asking us to pay a divorce bill of £52 billion is ludicrous, then what hope can there be of a sensible negotiation or even a deal? This was me at 9 o'clock this morning.
Now, I'm sorry to say that the response to the triggering of Article 50 has been all too predictable. Already you've made a series of demands that are not just unreasonable, but in some cases clearly impossible for Britain to comply with. You began by telling us that we have to pay a bill, a cool 52 billion sterling, a figure that has clearly been plucked out of the air, effectively a form of ransom demand. What you could have acknowledged is that we've put net over 200 billion sterling into this project. We're actually shareholders in this building and the rest of the assets, and really, you should be making us an offer we can't refuse to go. You have shown yourselves with these demands to be vindictive, to be nasty. All I can say is thank goodness we're leaving. You're behaving like the Mafia. You think we're a hostage. We're not. We're free to go.
Well, it all went down like a lead balloon. And the Italian president of the parliament called me to order and said that my use of the word mafia was unacceptable. And I thought for a moment and said, actually, do you know what? Given the cultural sensitivities of Italy towards the use of the word mafia, I will, for the first time in 18 years here, withdraw. You're not the mafia. You're just a bunch of gangsters. Because it seems to me that to ask us to pay 52 billion quid up front before they will even have a negotiation with us is the classic thing that a protection racket would do. Now, on the other side, the key figure in all of this is a man called Michel Barnier. Barnier, a Frenchman, upper-class Frenchman, commissioner, very, very powerful and important figure. And Jean-Claude Juncker and everybody else have really given him the top job in negotiating with the United Kingdom. This is what he had to say in response to me today.
The UK letter makes clear that the UK government will push for parallel negotiations on the withdrawal and the future relations. This is a very risky approach. To succeed, we need, on the contrary, to devote the first phase of negotiations exclusively to reaching an agreement on the principles of the exit. We are not proposing this to be tactical or create difficulties for the UK. On the contrary, it is an essential condition to maximise our chances to reach an agreement together within 2 years, which is very short. This is also our best chance to build trust, as Manfred Weber mentioned very clearly, to build trust before proceeding to the second phase of negotiations.
OK, so there are two phases. Phase one is we pay up and look big, we organise our divorce, and then perhaps we get a trade deal that comes afterwards. That is what Monsieur Barnier is saying. Following that debate, there were a series of votes in this Parliament. Let me tell you, let me lay out to you what the EU's negotiating position with Britain is right now. Number one, pay 52 billion quid up front and do it quickly. Number two, we should not, during this 2-year period, even talk to any other country in the world about signing a trade deal once we've left. Number three, any trade deal that comes thereafter will mean that Britain must not get a competitive advantage. We will have to keep all our rules and all our laws the same as the rest of Europe, which makes me think, why on earth would we bother to vote to leave if we couldn't become competitive? And number four, is that despite the fact the European Union say that they will negotiate together as one, they've made one little exception. And that is that the Kingdom of Spain can veto any future deal with the United Kingdom if they're not happy with the sovereignty of Gibraltar, which strikes me, frankly, as being an impossibility, given that the last time the Gibraltarians were asked, did they wish to remain British, 99% of them said that they did. So that is what the European Parliament today, by an overwhelming majority, voted on. And, you know, my argument is they're not being reasonable. But my question to you tonight is, if you were in charge of Britain's negotiations, what would you argue for? What should our red lines be in this negotiation? And I'm going to ask Andy in Cardiff. Andy, what would your red lines be in this negotiation?
Good evening. Can I make a quick point first, if I may, Nigel?
Sure.
I noticed that in watching this happen live, congratulations on your speech, by the way, it was excellent. Mr. Verhofstadt's speech, he actually went through his 3 key priorities for the EU. Not one of those priorities included the EU population. They were all about the EU Parliament and all about the businesses and nobody else. So what would I do? I would leave the table now. Because of these demands, I'd declare no deal. I'd notify the WTO that I'd like to discuss the invoking of our most favoured nation status, and then watch the EU elites scurry around the table, begging us to come back to the table. It'd soon change then, and the red lines would change as well. That's how you negotiate.
Andy, your point's very interesting, because the second part of my speech today, which was less controversial, I guess, but the second part of my speech today was, I said, look, all you're talking about here, and your point about Verhofstadt, I take on board. You're talking about the institution. You're not talking about European workers, about European people. And I made the point, you know, we don't need to buy German motor cars. We don't have to drink French wine or eat Belgian chocolate. We could choose to buy these things from other parts of the world. And you know what? If we finish up with a tariff war of some kind, I mean, not massive, but a tariff war of some kind between us and the EU, it is not the United Kingdom that will be hurt. It is actually the workers in Europe that will lose their jobs, because they need us economically far more than we need them. Andy, I completely get what you're saying. Do you think the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, would do such a thing?
I think that it's going to come to a point in the next few weeks. I think within 8 weeks' time, you'll see the UK Prime Minister in a position where she knows she's got nowhere else to go than to declare a no deal or to hint at there being no deal. Otherwise, she's going to be stuck with paying over £50 billion. She's been told already by everybody in Parliament almost that £3 billion's too much, never mind 50. So she's going to be between a rock and a hard place, and the only way she's going to go is the WTO.
Andy, I thank you very much for the absolute clarity of that call. So I'm making the point here, and Andy agrees with me, that the demands they've made are not just unreasonable, not just unacceptable, but frankly, politically impossible. Andy argues we should simply walk away. Is Andy right? Or do you think there is something, you know, if you were in Mrs. May's boots, is there something that you would bring to the table as a red line? Please let me know what you think. Call me on 0345 60 60 973. Text me at 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage at LBC, or watch us live on Facebook and comment there. Norman in Dubai, good evening. As a proper international caller here. Norman, what did you make of today's proceedings, and what would you do if you were in charge of Britain's renegotiation?
Well, I would ask you, what would you do? I mean, I think, first of all, congratulations on your speech. Your Churchillian tones that you exuded in the speech was absolutely compelling and very robust. What I would ask you, Nigel, is if you were in 10 Downing Street today, would you not have walked out of 10 Downing Street and absolutely said, these demands are impossible. We cannot accept that you will not allow us to exact trade deals, negotiate trade deals while we leave. You cannot impinge on our very sovereignty as a nation. It makes me feel that the Conservative government is just almost, there's an acceptance that the EU is allowing to set the framework and the agenda.
Well, Norman, I have to say, whenever Theresa May gives a big speech, it sounds fantastic. It sounds amazing. She uses words and phrases that I've used and been condemned for over 20 years. I think, wow, she's a genuine convert to the Brexit cause. That's when she gives the big set-piece speech. But when it comes to responding to these people, Norman, I think we're beginning to look rather weak already. You know, I've said this already, I'll say it again. A negotiation is about two sides sitting out their position. And in any negotiation, you always ask for a bit more than you think you can get. But what these guys have asked for today in the European Parliament and voted on by an overwhelming majority is simply impossible. And so, Norman, the biggest deal breaker to me on this is Gibraltar. You know, 35 years ago, General Galtieri invaded the Falklands. It was 8,000 miles away. But Mrs. Thatcher felt this country would never be the same again unless we defended the principle of national self-determination of those people living in the Falkland Islands. And we sent a task force, we won the war. Here we have Gibraltar. It's 30,000 people. As I say, the last referendum in 2003, 99% of them voted to stay with the EU. A referendum held today, the figure might be slightly higher than that, believe it or not. You know, so Gibraltar is a no-go.
Exactly.
So, Norman, my suggestion...
And Spain have their own colonies as well off the north coast of Africa, and these are not mentioned.
They have Melilla, they have Ceuta, and there are one or two others as well. So, no, you're absolutely right. There is massive hypocrisy from Spain. What I did this morning, I wrote in the Telegraph this morning that my suggestion was that what we do is we give the people of Gibraltar a referendum to ask them whether they want to become an integral part of the United Kingdom with their own MP in Westminster and with devolved powers, as we have for Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, but in this case to include taxation as well. And if the Gibraltarians accept that, which I now believe they would, we would then make Gibraltar no longer a pawn in these negotiations. So, Norman, the first thing I would do is remove Gibraltar as a pawn in these negotiations. The second thing I would do is, and I did it twice today, I asked the charming Monsieur Barnier, where did the figure of 52 billion come from? Or was it plucked out of the air? Answer, there came none. As far as being told, we can't negotiate with India or Trump or anybody else, I would simply ignore them. That's what I think. But look, if you disagree, folks, with what I've said, pick up the phone. Tell me where I'm going wrong. Call on 0345 60 60 973. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
In the last hour, Nigel Farage has been giving the EU Parliament the benefit of his views.
You're behaving like the Mafia, and this...
Barbara's in Bath.
This man is a self-serving, pompous hypocrite.
Got charisma, would you agree with that?
Yeah, he probably has to those that like that sort of charisma. So is Donald Trump.
Oh.
And I hate him as well.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, now open in Aberdeen.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
Why wait for tomorrow when you can drive away in your next car today? At Car Giant, we make buying a car easy. With up to 10,000 cars in stock, all in one location, find the car that's right for you and drive it home the very same day. Giant choice, giant savings. Book your test drive now at cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
I know what the plough looks like in the night sky. I know how Eskimos kiss. I know a time when a mullet wasn't a fish. And I definitely know this piece of music. But I don't know my state pension.
There's a simple way to find out when you can get your state pension and how much it'll be. Search Your State Pension and get to know yours.
Whether you're looking to get to Barnet with the wind in your hair or to hammer down to Hammersmith, if Piccadilly's like a circus or you need to trim your time to Shepherd's Bush, when you want to wing it to the angel and beat the herd to the elephant and castle. Whether it's tapping into the knowledge or breezing down the bus lanes, no one knows London like black cab drivers. My Taxi, the black cab app.
Here at the Claims Guys, we'd like to offer this assurance to anyone worried by the deadline on PPI claims. There is still time to make your claim. Our experts will work fast to discover if you were ever sold PPI, and once we've completed your free PPI check, you can then pursue your own claim or let us do it for you. It's your choice. Even if you can't find any paperwork, just text the word EASY to 60777 and let the Claims Guys do the rest. Text EASY to 60777 now.
The Claims Guys.
Divorce. It affects every part of your life. You, your family, your home, your finances. And if you're a man facing divorce, perhaps even one you don't want, the situation becomes even more complicated. It's at times like these that you need a professional you can trust. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordell.co.uk, office in central London. A partner men can count on.
Finally, it's spring. The days are getting longer. Time to gather friends and fire up the barbecue. Get your spring off to the perfect start with Weber. From the 18th of March until the 17th of April, buy a revolutionary Weber Genesis 2 gas barbecue, register it online, and get an iGrill 3 digital Bluetooth thermometer for free. Serving excellent food has never been easier. Visit Weber.com for more information. Weber, for life.
This is LBC, live from Strasbourg, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Well, once again, it's been a very lively day in the European Parliament, and I've called them a bunch of mafioso gangsters for demanding 52 billion sterling from us before they'll even have a sensible conversation. Yeah, you can guess it. Once again, I was the pantomime villain. But frankly, if you're being told to continue doing business, you've got to give us cash up front, how else could one think of it, apart from being a protection racket? A thought on the money. So we voted to leave the European Union on June the 23rd last year. It took us 9 months to trigger Article 50. And let's just assume we leave, 2 years exactly from now. We will have paid net, not gross, so no arguments here about money to the NHS or anything else. Net, we will have paid nearly 30 billion sterling from voting to leave to leaving, and they want another 52 billion on top. Since we joined this club, all the way back on the 1st of Jan 1973, net, we have paid in 200 billion sterling. I mean, just think what we could have done for our education system, our military, our hospitals, or whatever. And I honestly, I'd love them to show me, where does this 52 billion figure come from, and yet nobody can do anything of the kind. And your messages, your texts and tweets now coming in. Mark says, can we veto any trade deals the EU is negotiating to show them, what the boot feels like on the other foot? Actually, Mark, here's a funny thing. So now that we've triggered Article 50, one of the wordings in Article 50 is that in future, the European Council, namely where the 28 or now 27 heads of government come together, we are now excluded from the room, even when they're talking about us and making decisions that affect us. The only voice that we've now got in the European Union is here in the European Parliament. And it was very significant that a leading German politician today said he didn't think Nigel Farage now should speak in any future debates. Well, I tell you what, the hell with him. I am going to go on speaking in these debates, and I'm going to be here for the next 2 years, even if they abuse me in my lifts and hate me, because I want the British public to know what is really going on, good, bad, or ugly. Gaynor says, through a text to me, if the EU carry out their threats, we should block their trade agreements with our Commonwealth countries. Gaynor, it's the same point. We no longer have the power to do this. Jane says we should definitely walk away then all the companies and get them to put pressure on their own governments. Jane, the point I made was we haven't got to buy German cars, we haven't got to buy French wine, we haven't got to eat Belgian chocolate. And I reckon when they start to realise in Europe that this impossibility of a deal that has been put forward by these bullies here today actually means it's European jobs that will be lost, not British ones. Perhaps I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. John in Henley-on-Thames, tell me, am I right, am I wrong?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I've spoken to you before, and I think it's about time I bought you a pint, and I'd be happy to do so.
Well, the one thing I tell you what, Strasbourg is wonderful in terms of food and wine, but you can't get a proper pint of bitter. So you're making me feel quite thirsty. John, John, if you were in charge, what would your red lines be, John?
Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely ridiculous for them to ask us to pay an exit bill of $52 billion. I think they are just trying to frighten other countries from leaving the EU. The reality is they are self-destructing the EU by doing things like this, which in a way is a little sad. They're not
John, I thought today, and one of our earlier callers made the point, that all Mr Verhofstadt, who's the Parliament's negotiator, was talking about was the European Union, not actually European companies and European jobs and European people. And I thought today it actually felt a little bit like the last days of an empire, that they are so obsessed with these big glass and steel structures, with their jobs, their pensions, their chauffeur-driven cars, they've lost sight of what actually really matters. And my feeling is that if this finishes up as no deal, well, that's not perfect for us. But the point is, John, we're then free to negotiate whatever we like with the 85% of the global economy that is not part of the European Union. And if jobs are lost all over Europe because of the sheer stupidity of the Barniers, the Verhofstadts, the Junckers and whatever, then I would predict confidently we will not be the last country, John, to trigger Article 50.
No, I believe you. I believe you. I mean, they've been compared to Mafia, and I think probably the Mafia boss is more democratic than what Juncker and his crew are.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, hang on. Even I now have to say, John, that's a very extreme view. But you know, the Mafia are self-serving, unaccountable. So there are some similarities. John, I thank you for your call. And talking of Mr. Verhofstadt, well, we did this evening invite him onto this show. And if you're listening, Guy, you're very welcome. Just come on down. We'll put a stool up and we'll talk about this. And I'm going to go on inviting Mr. Verhofstadt onto this show. I wonder whether he will ever come. Jackie says, you keep saying they need us more than we need them. But you're wrong. We need each other. Get off your high horse. Jackie, economically, they sell us £80 billion worth of goods more every year than we sell them. But my desire, Jackie, is not for us to walk away from this without a deal. My desire is we have a sensible, common sense free trade deal. Some of the older listeners might remember a phrase called the common market. Had it been just a common market, we wouldn't have had a referendum. We wouldn't have had any problems at all. It's the fact they took it down the road of political union that led to all these problems. T texts me and says, your self-serving publicity stunt is a nuisance to Mrs. May's negotiations. Who made you a negotiator? Well, I'm not a negotiator, T, but I'll tell you what I am. I am leading the biggest British political party in this parliament, and I'm leading a transnational group in this parliament, and I was the only British spokesman on that front row in this parliament today. And if I've done one thing, if I've made people aware of this outrageous financial demand of £52 billion, then I don't regret it for one single minute. Matthew on Facebook says, I would walk away from it all. They are trying to rob us blind. I wouldn't pay them anything. Well, Matthew, I kind of get that. Let's move on to our next call, and let's go to John in Windsor. John, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. First time calling to your programme.
You're welcome.
and thanks for having me. The first thing I want to give a bit of context. So, actually, I'm one of those people you would call a Remainer. So I voted for Remain for two main reasons. One is because my view was that we could probably change the EU by being inside and negotiating internally, and also to avoid the risk of what we're now seeing is the lack of responsibility that the SNP is taking over Scotland, yeah? However, putting that aside, I would like to say that the way that the European Union is reacting to Brexit is like bullies. Yeah? So I think that the UK should actually call their bluff. And what a previous caller, Andy, mentioned, which says actually draw out early and call their bluff, is the right way to go. Because we've seen what happens with the EU when you show weakness. Look at Greece. And they've just mauled Greece to bits. Yeah? And have they shown any concern for the people of Greece? They're not going to show any concern for the people of the UK. And as another caller that you mentioned also, have they mentioned anything about the people of Europe? So they are sitting on an ivory tower, and that is the weakness of the European Union. Yeah, even though I'm a Remainer, I'm highlighting that point. And if they start bullying the UK, I think the UK should stand tall and draw a red line to Gibraltar, to the 52 billion, to everything that the UK believes is right.
John, you sound like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. You've made those arguments beautifully. They are behaving irrationally. They are behaving badly. They are behaving against the interests, actually, of the people of Europe. And I take every point you've made absolutely on board. Claire in Chandler's Ford. Claire, you're in charge of Britain's renegotiation. What do you do?
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Firstly, happy birthday for this week.
Well, thank you.
Happy birthday. I think your last caller is right in some ways. We need to stand a bit firmer on this as government. We're just sat there saying nothing about this 52 billion, really. Why don't we call the fund that? Why don't we say, OK, in principle, and they are the two big words, in principle, we will pay 52 billion at the end. If you, in exchange, agree that right now we pay nothing for the next 2 years. We're in negotiations now. We're not allowed at the table. Lots of meetings. So we suspend our payments now.
Well, do you know what, Claire? It was the Americans, wasn't it? It was the Americans all those years ago who talked about no taxation without representation. We are chucking in £30 million a day net. We're not even allowed at the table.
Yeah, we're not allowed at the table, so suspend the payments that we're putting in for the next 2 years. And whilst we're there, let's talk about what what the equity we have as stakeholders. And I reckon when push comes to shove at the end of it, it'll be all cancelled out.
Claire, I thank you for your call, and you're right. We've put 200 billion into this project. We're shareholders. We own part of this building that I'm in now. They should be paying us to leave and making us an offer that we simply can't refuse. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Barcia.
US President Donald Trump says the Syrian government was responsible for yesterday's chemical weapons attack. At least 70 people died in Idlib province. An emergency meeting of the UN Security Council has been held. A man's been charged with planning to carry out a terror attack armed with a knife. 21-year-old Umarait Mirza of St Agatha's Road in Birmingham was detained last week. He's due in court tomorrow. And Ken Livingstone has told LBC he only mentions Adolf Hitler when he's asked about him. Labour's National Executive Committee is to investigate his behaviour in the aftermath of the decision to suspend him over comments about Hitler and Zionism yesterday. LBC weather. Cloudy into the evening, a low of 6 Celsius. Mostly dry tomorrow with a mix of sunny spells and cloud and a high of 18 degrees.
LBC Travel. Good evening, I'm Andy Lake. Well, still delays of well over an hour on the M25 in Surrey, anti-clockwise approaching junction 9 for Leatherhead. It's stationary all the way back to 11 for Chertsey. 2 lanes there still blocked following a nasty collision. Elsewhere in London, queues on all approaches to the Hanger Lane Gyratory as 2 lanes are closed for repairs. Delays there back to Gunnersbury Park, the Greenford Flyover and the Iron Bridge respectively. Into Essex now, the A13 is closed westbound between the Pitsea Flyover and the Five Bells interchange after a car caught fire earlier. And in the West Midlands, the M6 is slow northbound between Spaghetti Junction and Junction 7 for Great Bar. That's not been helped by roadworks. Onto the tubes, no service on the Metropolitan line between Baker Street and Aldgate, leaving delays between Harrow on the Hill and Baker Street. Also severe delays on the Circle, Central and Hammersmith and City lines. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 83222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 83222.
Hi, I'm Rebecca from Network Rail, with important news if you're travelling by rail this Easter bank holiday. To deliver our railway upgrade plan, we're doing essential improvement work between the 14th and 17th of April, and your journey may be affected. We don't want to inconvenience you, but we need to do this work when the railway is less busy. So please keep your plans on track and check before you travel at nationalrail.co.uk/Easter. Thanks for your patience. Network Rail, working for you.
Match, Malcher, workplace chair, pension, pop. Sound a bit alien? Well, he's saying it's time for small businesses to set up a workplace pension. Still sound alien? Don't worry, the People's Pension can help. We're an award-winning scheme run by a provider with 30 years pensions experience. Our complete solution gives small businesses total support. Join the thousands of businesses already signed up at thepeoplespension.co.uk/alien. The People's Pension's a workplace pension scheme regulated by the Pensions Regulator. The People's Pension. Designed for people, not aliens.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
Why wait for tomorrow when you could drive away in your next car today? At Car Giant, we make buying a car easy. With up to 10,000 cars in stock, all in one location, find the car that's right for you and drive it home the very same day. Giant choice, giant savings. Book your test drive now at cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
Here at the Claims Guys, we'd like to offer this assurance to anyone worried by the deadline on PPI claims. There is still time to make your claim. Our experts will work fast to discover if you were ever sold PPI. And once we've completed your free PPI check, you can then pursue your own claim or let us do it for you. It's your choice. Even if you can't find any paperwork, just text the word EASY to 60777 and let the Claims Guys do the rest. Text EASY to 60777 now.
The Claims Guys.
This is LBC, live from Strasbourg, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
It's been a day of quite high drama here in Strasbourg in the European Parliament, where for the first time, publicly, we've seen the Brexit negotiators from the European Union. Monsieur Barnier from the European Commission, Mr Verhofstadt from the European Parliament. They are being uncompromising, I would say impossible, certainly extremely tough. They want 52 billion quid up front. They want to ban us from talking to the rest of the world. They want to bind us forever to their rule book. And, above all, they want Spain to have a say over the future of Gibraltar. It all looks impossible. So what has the response been? Because callers so far, and I've been asking you, what would you do if you were in charge? And we started off with Andy in Cardiff saying, just walk away and wait for them to come running after us because they need us more than we need them. Great call, Andy, and it kicked the programme off extremely well. But what has Mrs May said today? Well, as you probably know, she's in the Middle East. This is what Mrs May has said in response to a very, very hardline EU. She has said that the free movement of people from the European Union to the United Kingdom could be extended after Brexit. She said, quote, it will be necessary for there to be a period of time when businesses and governments are adjusting systems and so forth. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. The day the EU got impossibly tough with us is the day that the British Prime Minister said, well, I know you voted in a referendum for us to take back control of our borders, but this could take many, many years. You know, I've been here in this place a very long time, and the one thing that the European Union has no respect for is weakness. You show weakness, they will literally steamroller all over you. So I think, frankly, in response to everything, that is a very poor response, in my opinion, from the UK government today. I think their negotiating terms are literally impossible for us, and I don't think they're being reasonable in any way at all. If you agree with me or disagree with me, call me. Tell me, what would you do? If you were in charge of Britain's negotiation, what would your red lines be? Let me know on 0345 60 60 973. And I'm going to ask Ben in Tunbridge. Ben, you're in charge of Britain's renegotiation. What do you do?
Hello, Nigel. We've actually spoken before. Are you proud of yourself today?
Go on.
Because you're talking about EU negotiations and situations to be in, but you've literally started, or you've made the negotiations a million times worse by literally insulting the people that we're supposed to be negotiating with. And I mean, to be honest, Nigel, I listen to this programme a lot, and it infuriates me, because I hear people phoning up saying, "Oh, Nigel, you're the best thing that's ever happened to this country." No, sorry, you're the worst. I think that you're a demagogue and narcissistic in terms of this is what you wanted, this is what you want.
Yeah.
But you talk about how, the divorce bill, 50 billion, whatever, or we're not allowed to negotiate with other countries.
Yeah, I did.
Bearing in mind you've been in the European Parliament for 20 years, and I'm guessing that you're going to draw a pension from that European Parliament, and you've been on the Brussels gravy train, as you call it, for the last 20 years. Okay, so you must have known what was going to happen with Article 50. You must have known. You must know the ins and outs, which is along with what I spoke to you previously about the big lie. It's all a lie. You've lied to the British public. And
Whoa. Hang on, Ben. We can have different points of view, right? But what I have put to the British public is what I sincerely and honestly believe. Could I have judged, post-Article 50, the sheer level of irrationality that I saw in this place today? No. And I think the reason is, Ben, that it isn't just about Britain leaving the European Union. They now realise, with major elections coming up across the whole of Europe, this year, and with big ones in Italy and other countries next year, that actually it isn't just us. The whole of Europe is falling out of love with the European project because it is not based fundamentally on democracy. Or do you think it is?
Yeah, pretty much. I do think it is. And you talk about democracy. What makes me laugh, and this is something that I sometimes think about, and you're an educated man, so where is the birthplace of democracy? 5th century Athens, yeah?
Yeah.
And if Aristophanes, the great Greek comic, was here, he would have a field day with you, because seriously, you're leading these people with your posters and this, that and the other, and people phoning up on your programme saying, "Oh, Nigel, you're great." No. You're a failed politician who's on the Brussels gravy train. You couldn't get a seat in this country, so you have never been an MP in this country. You're there in Brussels taking the money, and you'll get your pension.
Well, Ben, hang on.
We'll leave the European Union, and you'll leave us. Right. So when you talk, can I say this?
Ben, I was the turkey. No, Ben, hang on. I was the turkey that voted for Christmas, and you mentioned Greece as the birthplace of modern democracy. Greece now, which is run by the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank and the European Commission, who can't even decide what money they spend on hospitals or pensions or benefits, and whose democracy has completely been taken away from them by the European Union. Your go.
Direct democracy does not work. Referendums do not work. When you have a binary decision over something that's so big, it does not work. And when you have demagogues such as yourself trying to persuade people with xenophobic posters and this, that and the other, and we're going to be... And so you talk about what we export to the EU and what the EU exports to us, right? Or what we import, export.
I mean, Ben, I have to say, you're sounding like a very sore loser, Ben. Very sore loser.
I'm not a sore loser. I'm just a realist. And
are you?
Yes, I'm a realist. Because all of a sudden, inflation's. I work in finance. Okay, so inflation's rose, the pound's dropped. Everything's going to be more expensive for everybody, and this is just a start.
And foreign and direct investment is up, and the stock market is up, and we've got over 24 countries around the world that now want to do positive trade deals with us, and we're doing much better than the Eurozone and the rest of the European Union. What's not to like, Ben?
Okay, your idea that we can just ignore the European Union saying we can't have trade unions, that's against the law. So, for example, if you have a contract with Sky, and you agree to pay Sky for 12 months, and then after 2 months you say, I want to get out, you have to carry on paying.
Of course. No, of course.
It's illegal. What you're suggesting is 100% illegal against international law. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to do this."
Listen, I've had enough of this gibber. All right, no, Ben. The current spending round in the European Union expires in 2020. All right, but also, under the treaties, under Article 50, once we're out, we have no future obligations. There may be a tiny bill to pay, but it certainly ain't 52 billion. Interestingly, and that was fun though, but interestingly, our next caller is from Gibraltar. Louise, good evening.
Good evening.
So, Louise, you're being used as a pawn in these negotiations. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's not surprising, isn't it?
What? Because the Spanish...
We expected that. I mean, Spain has been bullying us all along from the very beginning for years and years. And now I think that their true colours have been seen by everybody else now.
Well, Louise, I agree with you. I think Spain are behaving appallingly. They don't respect the principle of national self-determination, which, of course, is one of the fundamental, and they never have. Even
today, they had a warship in our waters.
I know.
And the Royal Navy had to get them out. But that's not new. That happens all the time.
So, Louise,
last year, I think there was 400 incursions in our waters. They just take the mickey out of us all the time.
So, Louise, did you see my suggestion in the newspaper this morning that the only way of dealing with this and of sending a strong signal and of making Gibraltar not a pawn for the next 2 years in these negotiations is to give you a referendum and give you the choice of becoming a fully integrated part of the United Kingdom? Does that, in your view, work?
Well, that would be up to my government to decide that and put it to the people. And I know that the people are very united. We always have been and we always will be.
Okay, so Louise, if there was a referendum that offered you the chance to become part of the United Kingdom with your own MP in Westminster and your own devolved powers, including tax, would you vote for it?
I think I would.
Yeah, because otherwise...
But then I know that we might lose our own government here.
But actually, you would maintain a government, just as we have a Scottish Parliament and a Welsh Assembly. We have Stormont in Northern Ireland. You know, you would still have your own government, and you would still have huge devolved powers, including taxation. But the message to Spain and the European Union is: don't mess with Gibraltar. It's part of the United Kingdom. I think that I can't see, Louise, honestly, and I've thought hard about this. I can't see any other way of dealing with this problem.
Well, if that gets rid of Spain and their claim on Gibraltar, then yes, I would.
Good. Louise, I thank you for your call, and I'm sorry for loyal Gibraltarians that Donald Tusk has done what he's done and made you a pawn in this game. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
Jeremy Corbyn has ordered a fresh investigation into Ken Livingstone, saying he's continued to make offensive remarks. Should the former London mayor now be expelled from Labour?
Clive Bull on LBC.
I know how to avoid a soggy bottom. I know the name of cinema's most famous white shark. I know all the things you can do with a Maris Piper. And I definitely know the TV show that made this music famous. But I don't know my state pension.
There's a simple way to find out when you can get your state pension and how much it'll be. Search Your State Pension and get to know yours.
Cue the big sale at Network Q, the best place for approved used Vauxhalls. Cue the finance with 7.9% APR representative. Cue the savings with a big £500 deposit contribution. And cue the extras with 1 year's roadside assistance and 1 year's warranty. Cue the big sale at your local Vauxhall Network Q retailer between the 7th and 24th of April. Personal contract purchase. Finance subject to status. 18 plus T's and C's apply. Finance provided by Vauxhall Finance. Available on selected models of participating retailers.
Come and experience Lebanese dining at Marouche Restaurants. Try some of our amazing dishes, kafta dipped in a delicious hummus, or a colourful meze, complemented by a robust Lebanese red. With live music and traditional belly dancing, enjoy an atmosphere to match the food's rich and distinctive flavours. Go to Marouche.com to find out more. Marouche Restaurants, the finest Lebanese food across London.
Here's another true story from Aldermartin, Baines and Cuthbert. When fire tore through a residential London development in 2015, the local health and safety executive were quickly on the scene. Fortunately, ABC had all the right health and safety paperwork and certificates, and to the great relief of the building's owners, were able to prove there was no fault. No fuss, no hassle. For block management, ABC Estates will give your story an ending that'll make you as happy as Larry. Find out more at abcestates.co.uk or call 0800 888 6688.
The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Our next open day is on the 26th of April. Register now at globalacademy.com.
Interest. If you're not getting much of a return on your savings, speak to Cufflink. Cufflink is not a bank, but are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. You can lend your money with theirs into bricks and mortar. With Cufflink, you can get between 5 and 7.2% gross interest per annum. Talk to Cufflink at lendingtogether.co.uk and do something with your money. Past returns are not necessarily a guide to future returns. Your capital may be at risk.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Strasbourg, only on LBC.
Well, passions were very strong in the European Parliament today, and when I called them a bunch of gangsters with mafioso tendencies, my goodness me, they didn't like it. But then again, we've been given this bill of 52 billion quid without any justification whatsoever and told pay or you're not going to have a proper negotiation. Well, there are plenty of passions on this show tonight as well, and on texts and tweets, Richard says the EU is choosing principle and punishment over common sense, and really, its gamesmanship will not last. Philip says we should start to boycott French and German, French wine and German cars. Miguel on Facebook, I don't know whether you're Spaniard, Miguel, says you should resign. You got Brexit based on lies, and there's nothing else for you to do. You're not the government. Nobody is going to negotiate with you, and you should leave. Miguel, let me tell you something, old son. There's about 500 MEPs today think exactly the same thing. Alicia is even more charming. She says, you're a charlatan. You're abusing the poor people who only understand the simple and stupid words that come out of your mouth. You should not be allowed anywhere near the European Parliament. But Alicia, I was elected to it. I lead UKIP. We won the European elections. I'm sorry, you may not like it, but that's the way it is. And I'll tell you something. If my simple and stupid words have made people in Britain today understand this extraordinary extortion racket of being asked to produce 52 billion quid before beginning a serious negotiation. Do you know what? In the light of that, I couldn't give a damn who I upset. I'm pleased we're leaving the European Union because I think Britain's future is global. Maybe our next caller proves that, because our next caller is Nick, who is calling from Vancouver. Good evening, Nick.
Mr. Farage, good to speak to you. I've lived in Canada now for 35 years. I got out in the late 70s because Britain was basically bankrupt and falling apart.
Yep.
I was always amazed that Britain was able to take advantage of the EU as much as it was, because I've never seen our country as being particularly competent outside of the empire. I can't speak to the jackboot of European regulations laying its whip across the country because I haven't lived there Britain pretty much looked the same throughout the 2 or 3 times a year that I come back and visit. I never really saw anything different about it. I can say one thing for absolute certainty. Whatever Britain loses from EU trade, it will not make up with the rest of the world. So the $50 billion bill that you're being presented, it's a straight cost-benefit analysis. Does Britain do more than 50 billion quid's worth of trade with Europe? If you do, you pay the bill and you get on with it because you need that trade. You're not going to make up trade in Canada. I've lived here for 35 years. There's never been anything stopping British companies from doing business here. Britain doesn't make things that Canadians want. Germany does twice the business with Canada that Britain does, even though they don't speak the same language. I live in a house with a German dishwasher, a German vacuum cleaner. I drive a German car. I've got a French pots and pan set, an Italian coffee maker. The only thing I have in my house that's British is a pair of loudspeakers, because we do make good loudspeakers in Britain still, but we don't make much of anything the rest of the world wants, and Brexit isn't going to change that.
Nick, the point is this, surely, that as far as the EU's concerned, we trade with them at an annual deficit of an eye-watering £80 billion a year. If anyone's paying money to have a free trade deal, I think the Germans and the EU should be paying us to have this free trade deal. And your point about what we make in the broader world, well, I would say this year, last year, Nick, for the first time ever, or certainly in modern history, there were more motor cars manufactured in the United Kingdom that were sold to non-EU countries than were sold to EU countries. And I just think, given that 85% of the global economy is outside the European Union, being free to make tariff-free and barrier-free deals with the rest of the world, surely in the 21st century must offer some potential advantage.
I have no doubt that if you leave the EU, British companies will desperately scramble to find other markets as tariffs go up in Europe. But it's not going to replace the business you do with Europe. 20 or 30 years down the road, this may turn out, Britain may eventually replace European trade with trade somewhere else, but it'll take 20 or 30 years.
But Nick, Canada has just negotiated a free trade deal with the European Union without having to pay a membership fee and without having the free movement of people. And the message here, Nick, is we're not anti-Europe, we're anti the European Union. We want to trade with Europe, cooperate with Europe, and be good next-door neighbours. Surely that's a reasonable position, isn't it?
Well, it's up to them, isn't it? They signed a trade deal with Canada because we dig things out of the ground that Europe needs. They didn't sign a free trade agreement with Canada so that we could sell them cars. They signed a free trade agreement with Canada so we could sell them platinum, diamonds, gold, wood, coal, petroleum.
Yep.
That's what Canada sells. We have a market, we have a product that the whole world wants, and we signed free trade agreements because of that. We also have some of the biggest wheat fields in the world, so we will be selling Europe our commodities. We are what's called a primary producer.
But we sell stuff to Europe.
We don't dig anything up anymore. We don't. And ironically, the largest single thing that Britain trades with Canada is gold. It's the single largest product that Britain trades with Canada, which is bizarre because Britain doesn't dig any gold up at all. It's just
But Nick, whether we're digging stuff up or selling insurance services or whatever it may be, my point, sir, is you do not need to be in political union to buy and sell goods and services from each other. I thank you very much for your Canadian perspective. Facebook, Michael says, are you happy with causing the worst thing to happen to the UK since World War II? Now you go to the EU and upset the very people we want to get a good deal with. Very 1930s, Michael. Don't upset Mr. Hitler, for goodness sake. Don't rile him, don't provoke him. Just keep giving him a little bit more, and then he won't come after us. What they've done today to us here, what they've done with these 4 demands that I've been through in this programme is wholly unreasonable, would be a disaster for us. We should not appease them in the face of all of this. And I can't believe the government's reaction to all of this today is to suggest that even after we've left, freedom of movement of people could go on for years. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. And by the way, I did also suggest today that I would, if I was Theresa May, make a big magnanimous gesture. And I would say that all 3.3 million EU citizens living in the United Kingdom had come there legally and would have their rights protected. So I wasn't just in there trying to punch their lights out all day. I was saying that for a negotiation, both sides have to give a bit. And if we were to give that, could they please get rid of this ludicrous £52 billion bill? Matthew says on Facebook, I still can't see how we're being bullied. We were committed to make budget payments for a set time. It was always going to be a divorce bill of some kind. Well, Matthew, I get that, but remember that from last Wednesday, despite paying in £30 million a day net, we no longer have any say at the top table. And I would have thought a reasonable, sensible negotiation would be, look, we're paying you $30 billion during this period anyway. My last caller of the evening is Anil in Norbury. Anil, you're in charge of Britain's negotiations. What would you do?
Now, Mr. Farage, your behaviour in the Parliament, you call them Mafia and gangsters. How does that help in the future?
Well, hopefully it helps in waking up the British public as to actually what is going on. Because I've seen this figure of £52 billion swept under the carpet.
How does that help?
What should I say? Thank you very much. Yeah, let's pay. Great. Make it $100 billion. What are we worried about?
Why call them names? They didn't call you names. Why?
Anil, they've been calling me names for 20 years. In fact, they called me a lot. They called me a lot worse today than I called them. Believe you me.
But why do it? We need friends in Europe.
We need, actually, to have a level-headed, balanced argument with Europe, Anil. I understand if you're upset, and I'm sorry. Look, it's been a hell of a day here. They have set out what are, frankly, completely impossible terms. And I think Andy in Cardiff, our first caller tonight, was dead right. If something's impossible, then what you do is you walk. You walk away and you wait for them to come running after you, because actually they, in the end, will come under massive pressure from German car makers and French wine producers and all the rest of it. In the end, the market will win, despite the short-term stupidity of many running the European Union who care more about their political project than their own voters and their own people. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. So Jeremy Corbyn has ordered a fresh investigation into the behaviour of Ken Livingstone, saying he's continued to make offensive remarks. So should the former London mayor now be expelled from Labour? President Trump has been speaking